Khazars, a Turkic nomadic group that, by the late 6th century, had carved out a powerful commercial empire stretching across modern-day southern Russia, Ukraine, Crimea, and even parts of Kazakhstan. Imagine them sitting right along the ancient Silk Road. This prime location turned them into one of the major players in trade between Eastern Europe and Asia. They became a kind of medieval economic powerhouse, bridging connections between places as far apart as China, the Middle East, and the Slavic regions in the north. Now, Khazaria didn't just stand strong as a trading giant. It served a key strategic role, especially as a buffer state. Positioned between the Byzantine Empire to the west and the nomadic tribes and powerful Islamic caliphates to the south, Khazaria became an essential ally for Byzantium. In fact, at one point, the Khazars even acted as a Byzantine proxy against the Sasanian Empire in Persia. But as times changed, so did alliances. By around the year 900, the Byzantines pulled away from Khazaria, turning instead to encourage new allies like the Alans to challenge Khazar influence in areas like Crimea and the Caucasus. They even started reaching out to the growing Rus power to the north, seeing an opportunity to spread Christianity. In the end, Khazaria's reign lasted about 3 centuries, but it came to a sharp close when Sviatoslav I of Kiev and his allies took down the Khazar capital, Atil, between 965 and 969, ending the Khazars' independence. Now, trying to pin down exactly where the Khazars came from or what their culture was like gets complicated. Their state was incredibly diverse. Different ethnic groups, languages, and religions all coexisted within the Khazar Khaganate. It's believed that their native belief system was something called Tengrism, similar to other Turkic groups and even the Huns in the region. Over time, Khazaria became a cultural mosaic, with people practicing everything from paganism to Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. In fact, some say the Khazar ruling elite converted to Judaism around the 8th century. But how widely this conversion actually spread within the Khaganate is still up for debate. What happened after Khazaria fell is a bit of a mystery, sparking all kinds of theories. Some say the Khazars may have blended into various groups across Eurasia, possibly influencing groups like the Kazakhs, the Crimean Karaites, or even the Cossacks in certain Jewish communities. In the late 19th century, a theory emerged that the Khazars might be connected to the ancestry of Ashkenazi Jews, but modern linguistic and genetic studies don't really support this, and most historians are pretty skeptical of the idea. Still, it's a theory that occasionally resurfaces, although often surrounded by controversy. Interestingly, even today, in some Turkic languages, the Caspian Sea is still called the Khazar Sea, a small reminder of the influence this ancient state once had. And in its early stages, the Khazar Empire wasn't a single, unified group. Instead, it started as a mix of various steppe tribes, nomadic groups who were eventually united under a Turkic leadership core. This wasn't a matter of shared ethnicity, but rather a loose federation of different peoples, each bringing its own cultural influence into the fold. Among these groups were Turkic tribes known as the Göktürk, including the Saragars, Ogurs, Onagurs, and Bulgars. These tribes had originally been part of the TL Confederation, a well-established alliance in the east. However, they were driven westward by conflict, first by the powerful Sabirs, and later by the encroaching Asian Avars. By the mid-5th century, they had settled in the vast steppe regions of western Eurasia. These tribes likely traced their origins back to areas as far as Mongolia and South Siberia, finding their way westward after the collapse of older nomadic powers like the Huns. When they eventually united, their collective strength allowed them to overcome the Eurasian Khaganate, another dominant steppe power in Central Asia. This victory set the stage for them to head west, bringing other nomadic groups from the Sogdian regions along with them. At the helm of this tribal confederation was a ruling family, possibly from the Ashina clan, an influential group within the Western Turkic Khaganate. While there is some debate on this, several sources, including Chinese and Arabic accounts, strongly suggest that the Ashina clan played a key role in forming the Khazar leadership. The clan's leader may have been Yipishikui, though his fate remains uncertain as he likely lost power or met a violent end around 651. The Confederation then began moving toward the lands of the Akitsaroi, a group once aligned with the Byzantine Empire and resisting the Huns. By around 630, the first signs of a unified Khazar state started to take shape. This emerged from the remnants of the Göktürk Khaganate, a once powerful empire whose armies had already reached the Volga region, pushing the Avars further west. The Ashina clan, gaining strength around this time, overthrew the Rurans and founded the Göktürk Khaganate in 552, which they called Turkic. By 568, these Göktürks were even exploring alliances with Byzantium to counter Persian influence in the region. However, internal strife soon erupted within the Göktürks. Following the death of the leader Taspir Khagan, a succession dispute led to a fracture in the empire. This division, combined with pressure from the Tang dynasty in the east, split the Western Turks into two factions, each led by 5 tribes known collectively as the 10 Arrows. While the eastern tribes clashed with the Tang dynasty, the western tribes saw the rise of new nomadic states, including the Khazar Khaganate and Old Great Bulgaria under Kubrat, which challenged Avar dominance in the region. With the Chinese forces eventually asserting control over the eastern steppes, the Khazars were left to consolidate power in the west. As the Göktürk Khaganate disintegrated, the Khazars took advantage, forming a cohesive state by around 670. They quickly established control over a vast area stretching from the lower Volga River eastward, subjugating nearby tribes such as the Onogur Bulgars. The Khazar Khaganate thus became the western successor to the Göktürk legacy, carrying forward many of its traditions and solidifying its place as a significant regional power. And the Byzantine Empire had a pretty interesting approach to managing relations with the Khazars and other steppe peoples. Essentially, Byzantium kept these groups engaged in conflict with each other, preventing any one of them from gaining too much power in the region. A perfect example is how they regularly paid the Pechenegs to keep them on their side during the 9th century. And it wasn't just the Pechenegs. Byzantium also reached out to the Göktürks, teaming up with them against common enemies when needed. In fact, during the Byzantine-Sasanian War in the early 7th century, they even formed an alliance with the Western Turks to fight against the Persian Empire. The Byzantines actually referred to Khazaria as Turkiya, which tells you a lot about how closely they associated the Khazars with the broader Turkic world. By the 9th century, they were even calling the Khazars Turks. This connection was reinforced around the time of the famous siege of Constantinople in 626. Emperor Heraclius reached out to the Western Turkic Khaganate leader, Tang Yabhu Khagan, to form an alliance. Heraclius really went all in, promising gifts and even proposing a marriage between his daughter, Epiphania, and Tang Yabhu himself. This offer worked wonders. Tang Yabhu responded by sending a sizable force to strike Persian territory, leading to the start of the Third Perso-Turkic War. Together, the Byzantine and Turkic forces pulled off some significant victories. They breached the Caspian Gates, sacked Derbent, and even launched an assault on Tiflis, where it's thought the Byzantines may have used early forms of traction trebuchets to break through city defenses. Tang Yabhu even left thousands of his own troops to support Heraclius, although some reports might exaggerate the exact numbers. Once the Khazars rose to power as an independent force after the Göktürks fragmented, Byzantine leaders saw them as a valuable ally. Take the story of Justinian II, for instance, the emperor who was exiled and then sought refuge with the Khazars in Crimea around 705. He was given asylum by the Khazar ruler, Bizir-Glavin, who even offered his sister in marriage to seal the alliance. But it didn't take long for betrayal to enter the scene. Tiberius III, the Byzantine usurper, tried to bribe Bizir to kill Justinian. Thanks to his wife's warning, Justinian managed to escape to Bulgaria, where he gathered the support of Khan Tervel to reclaim his throne. The Byzantines continued to seek alliances through marriage. Emperor Leo III, for instance, orchestrated a union between his son Constantine V and a Khazar princess named Sitsak in the 8th century. This union symbolized a solid partnership between the two powers against a common threat, the expanding Arab forces. Sitsak even converted to Christianity, taking on the name Irene. Their son, Leo IV, became known as the Khazar, although his untimely death eventually broke the Khazar link to the Byzantine throne. Meanwhile, the Khazars expanded their influence over Crimea and parts of Kherson in the Byzantine peninsula. They even had a presence in the Byzantine Hetaria bodyguard unit by 840. By the 7th and 8th centuries, they were clashing with the Arab caliphates in a series of bloody conflicts. The First Arab-Khazar War began as Muslim forces reached Armenia and pushed north, only to be repelled with significant casualties by Khazar defenders at Balanjar. This was a time of siege engines and catapults, and according to the Persian historian al-Tabari, both sides used them in this early clash. After a lull due to the First Muslim Civil War, the conflict reignited in the 8th century. The Khazars raided Muslim territories in Transcaucasia, and by 780 they were pushing deep into Arab-held lands. A notable Khazar leader, Barjik, even managed to capture parts of Azerbaijan after a fierce battle, though his forces faced a serious defeat at Mosul the following year. In a surprising twist in 737, Marwan ibn Muhammad launched a surprise attack on the Khazars under the pretense of peace talks. He forced the Khazar ruler to submit and convert to Islam, but this subjugation didn't last long. With internal instability plaguing the Arab Empire, the Khazars soon regained independence and, some say, even began considering Judaism as a marker of their distinctiveness from the surrounding powers. By 758, the Abbasid Caliphate attempted to restore ties with the Khazars, but things turned sour quickly. A diplomatic marriage was arranged, only for the Khazar princess to die mysteriously. Her grieving father blamed Arab officials, and the Khazar general Raz Tarkan launched a devastating campaign across Armenia and other regions. And now let's dive deeper into the story of the Rus and the decline of the Khazarian state. By the 9th century, the Varangian Rus, a fierce blend of warrior merchants from the north, were beginning to venture down the river routes dominated by the Khazars and their allies, the Volga Bulgarians. These waterways, crucial trade routes for silver, ironwork, and fur, had brought prosperity to the Khazarian realm for centuries. The Varangians were drawn in by tales of Arab silver flowing into the Khazar trade hubs, which the Rus sought to tap into. Their interactions began as trade and tribute, but quickly escalated as the Rus realized that consolidating power among local Slavic and Finno-Ugric tribes could give them an edge. This coalition of Rus, Slavs, and other groups likely took inspiration from the Khazars, who had united diverse tribes under a single leadership. Some scholars think this may have led the Rus to establish their own Khaganate, drawing from Khazar statecraft, which would ultimately evolve into the influential Kievan Rus. The Khazars, aware of the growing threat from these organized northern warriors, sought to fortify their defenses. They built the fortress of Sarkul, enlisting Byzantine expertise, and began minting their own coins to affirm their sovereignty. But despite these efforts, by the late 9th century, Khazaria was facing pressure on multiple fronts. The steppe Pechenegs were encroaching from the east, and the rising Rus power was challenging them from the north, all of which chipped away at the Khazar Empire's stability. As alliances constantly shifted, the Byzantines, wary of Rus incursions, sometimes supported Khazaria against the Varangian threats. However, the Khazars also occasionally allowed the Rus to pass through their lands in exchange for a share of the loot, further complicating the geopolitical web of the region. By the early 10th century, though, the Khazars found themselves surrounded by hostilities, with new raids and rebellions breaking out among former allies and client states. The era of Pax Khazarica, where Khazaria held influence over many neighboring regions, was starting to crumble. In the mid-10th century, the Rus began their direct attacks on the Khazar Khaganate. Sviatoslav I, a powerful Rus ruler, led a campaign that effectively shattered Khazar dominance, sweeping through fortified cities like Sarkal and the capital, Atil. By 969, the Khazar stronghold was broken, marking the end of their imperial power. Some remnants of the Khazar state and its people lingered on, but they were largely absorbed by neighboring groups or dispersed across the steppe. The Khazar legacy, however, wasn't entirely erased. For a while, Khazar traditions and even Jewish customs influenced regions like Hungary, where certain Khazar-derived practices were integrated by groups migrating westward. Some Khazar Jews were even present at the court of Kievan Rus leaders, hinting at the residual influence of Khazar culture on the region. By the late 10th century, with the Rus firmly established and Khazaria's former strongholds reduced to ruins, the once thriving Khazar realm faded from political prominence. Their legacy, though, lived on in folklore, remembered as a distant, powerful state that had once connected the Islamic and Byzantine worlds with the northern tribes.